Chapter 15. Don't Want to Go Home. As evening deepened, the earlier tension in the lounge faded, replaced by a quiet, purposeful energy that buzzed just beneath the surface. Tess and Jake were engaged in a low-stakes, highly competitive game of pool in the corner, the soft clack providing a rhythmic backdrop to the murmur of conversation. Raffi and Doc were seated at the low table, quietly running through a checklist of medical supplies and field dressings. Finn and Amara claimed 2 stools at the bar, their hands wrapped around glasses of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the low light. "So, how do we do this?" Amara asked softly, tracing the rim of her glass with her thumb. "Even if she drops us directly into the holding cells, we're flying blind. We don't know the layout of the facility, patrol routes, or where the security hubs are." Finn frowned, staring thoughtfully into his amber drink. "If the facility is entirely underground, Athelgard probably used standard modular corporate architecture. But guessing gets us killed." He glanced over his shoulder to where Ellie sat curled on the leather couch, her eyes wide and rimmed with fatigue as she watched the pool game unfold. "Ellie," Finn called out gently, "could you come over here for a second? I need you to do something for me." Ellie slipped off the couch and padded across the floor in her sturdy boots, tilting her head up to meet Finn's gaze at the bar. Finn reached over the counter and grabbed a blank data pad, bringing up a drawing application. He laid it flat on one of the stools and handed her a stylus. "We don't know anything about it," Finn said softly, leaning down to her eye level. "You know that place better than any of us. I need you to draw what you remember of the moon base. Everything. Where the cells are, where Miss Church kept the machine, even the places they told you never to go." Ellie accepted the stylus, her small fingers trembling as she stared down at the softly glowing screen. She hovered over the blank blue space, hesitating for a long moment, before finally pressing the tip to the glass. Her movements were slow and deliberate as she began to draw. As the crude, blocky lines began to form the layout of the underground base, she explained what she was mapping. She drew a large rectangle near the top of the screen first. "When I first went there, I stayed with the other girls in a big room," Ellie murmured, her voice tight as she sketched a series of small, neat squares inside the rectangle. There were rows of beds, but it didn't stay full for long. As time passed, and kids stopped coming back from the tests, they moved the rest of us deeper. She drew a long, straight line leading away from the large room. "I eventually moved into my own room," Ellie continued, sketching 3 small, isolated boxes at the very end of the corridor. She pointed to one of the boxes. "That was my room. Jade was across the hall. James was on my left. The doors were heavy and they locked from the outside. The guards only opened them when it was time for the machine." "Where is the machine, Ellie?" Raffi asked gently, having stepped away from the table to lean against the edge of the bar and watch her draw. Ellie pulled the stylus downward, sketching a wide, circular chamber at the heart of her map, encircled by thick, heavy lines. "Here," she whispered, a shudder running through her small frame. "The testing room, it's big. Lots of lights and monitors. The machine sits right in the middle." Finn studied the rough map, his tactical instincts already dissecting the angles. The layout was starkly linear, channeling the assets straight from the holding cells into the heart of the testing chamber. It took some time that night to get a rough idea of the layout she remembered. Ellie added details about guard stations, the sterile medical bay, and a massive set of double blast doors that she had never seen opened. As she tried to recall the mess hall's location, a huge, jaw-cracking yawn escaped her, and the stylus slipped in her tired grip. Amara stepped in, gently sliding the datapad aside. All right, that's enough tactical mapping for tonight. Time for you to get some sleep, kid. Ellie rubbed her eyes, too tired to argue, and nodded slowly. Okay. Amara led the exhausted girl back down the companionway to her cabin, leaving the rest of the crew to stare at the glowing, ominous map on the bar. It's a bottleneck, Tess pointed out, leaning over to inspect the screen. If she drops us into her cell, we still have to move down that main corridor to reach the testing chamber. If we trigger an alarm in the hallway, they can trap us between the cells and the machine. Which is why we don't trigger the alarm, Raffi rumbled, crossing his massive arms. I take point. I clear the hallway with suppressed fire. You slice the door to the testing room, we grab the machine, and we leave. We can't just grab it, Doc argued, shaking his head. A machine that amplifies neural pathways to tear holes in space-time is going to have massive power conduits and delicate biometric interfaces. If we yank the wrong cable, we might fry the core, or worse, overload it. Finn rubbed his eyes, exhaustion crashing over him in a sudden physical wave. He'd been running on grief and adrenaline for days, and now he was running on empty. We aren't going to solve this tonight, Finn said, his voice rough. He tapped the datapad, saving Ellie's drawing and turning the screen dark. We're all dead on our feet. If we try to plan a black site infiltration right now, we're going to miss something that gets us killed. Jake set his pool cue down, rolling his shoulders with a loud crack. You're right. I'm starting to see double. We come back to it in the morning, Finn decided, looking around the lounge at his exhausted, dedicated crew. With fresh heads, get some sleep. The next morning, the Iron Orchid was quiet, save for the low, comforting hum of the environmental scrubbers. Finn and Amara were sitting in the pilot and co-pilot chairs on the flight deck, nursing steaming mugs of strong, bitter coffee. The local star had crested the horizon of Kiln, but the Orchid was parked so deep in the shadowed ravine of the Bone Pit that the sunlight hadn't yet reached down to illuminate the cockpit viewport. Outside, the rusted skeletal legs of the ancient mining machines were still swallowed in gloomy twilight. Finn took a slow sip, feeling the heat chase away the last lingering chill of his dreams. For the first time in almost a week, he had actually slept through the night. The deep, heavy sleep had finally cleared the fog of exhaustion from his brain, leaving his thoughts sharp and focused. Okay, Finn murmured, staring out at the dark, jagged rocks. When everyone is up, we plan how to go about this. Amara nodded, wrapping both hands around her warm mug. She looked equally refreshed, the dark circles under her green eyes noticeably lighter. Agreed. We couldn't afford another mistake. Today is the day we decide exactly what we do and how we get it done. Before Finn could reply, the heavy bulkhead door slid open with a soft hiss. Tess and Freya walked onto the flight deck, looking remarkably cheerful for a crew hiding in a dead canyon. Walking between the two tall mechanics, wearing her new, perfectly fitted spacer outfit and a thick woolen sweater, was Ellie. She looked rested, her dark hair neatly brushed, and a faint hint of color had finally returned to her pale cheeks. Morning, captains? Freya grinned, leaning on the back of a seat. How about some breakfast? Jake is making pancakes. Amara smiled, taking another sip of her coffee. I thought I smelled something nice, and here I thought Jake only knew how to burn casseroles. He insists pancakes are an art form, Tess laughed, giving Ellie a gentle nudge. We convinced him to hold off on the syrup until everyone was at the table. Come on, you two. You can brood over the tactical map after you've eaten. Finn rose, setting his mug on the console. The heavy tension of the night before had lifted, replaced by the warm, lively chaos of the Orchid's crew. For the first time since the comms call on Wynne, hope sparked in his chest. "Lead the way," Finn said, gesturing for Ellie to go ahead of him. They walked back down the companionway to the galley. The room was bright and noisy, smelling incredibly of toasted batter and sweet syrup. Jake was standing at the stove, expertly flipping a massive pancake in a skillet, while Raffi and Doc were already seated at the large metal table, nursing cups of coffee. "Perfect timing," Jake announced, sliding the golden brown pancake onto a growing stack on a platter. "Grab a plate. The Orchid's finest breakfast is served." They gathered around the table, passing the platter and tearing into the hot food. For a little while there was no talk of Athelgard, biological jump gates, or the terrifying shadows in the void. There was only the sound of clinking silverware, Jake defending his culinary skills against Freya's teasing, and the quiet, hesitant sound of Ellie actually laughing at one of Raffi's terrible jokes. Finn watched them, a profound sense of gratitude swelling in his chest. Leon had died alone in the rain, but he hadn't died for nothing. He had given this girl a chance, and now Finn had a crew willing to risk everything to finish the job. When the last pancake was gone and the plates were cleared, the mood in the galley naturally began to shift. The laughter faded, replaced by the serious, focused energy of professionals preparing for work. Finn switched on the datapad, bringing up the crude, blue-lined map Ellie had drawn the night before. He set it in the center of the table. "All right," Finn said, his dark eyes meeting the gaze of everyone at the table. "Breakfast is over. Let's talk about Umbrix." The relaxed atmosphere of the galley instantly vanished, replaced by the sharp, calculating focus of a veteran crew preparing for a heist. Amara leaned forward, resting her elbows on the metal table, her green eyes fixed on Ellie. "Ellie, we need to go through this map in more detail," Amara said gently, tapping the screen. "You said you can open a gate directly into the holding cells, but once we step through that door, we are in a dangerous place. We need to know exactly when to go in. When is security at its absolute lowest?" Ellie stared down at her own drawing, her small brow furrowing in thought. "At night," she murmured. "Or, what they told us was night. There are no windows, but they kept us on a strict schedule. When we went to bed, they always gave us exactly 12 hours of rest." 12 hours? Doc frowned, adjusting his glasses. "That's an unusually long sleep cycle for a corporate facility." "We needed it," Ellie said softly, rubbing her temples. "The testing, the jumping, it drains you. You feel empty afterwards, like your bones are cold. They needed us fully recovered before they put us back on the machine." "And the guards?" Finn prompted, leaning in. "Where are they during this rest cycle?" "They leave the cell block," Ellie explained, pointing to the long corridor she had drawn leading away from the 3 small rooms. There was always one guard stationed outside the heavy blast doors at the end of the hall by the room with the machine, but the rest of them would leave to patrol the exterior tunnels, the big caverns where the supply ships land. Raffi let out a low, rumbling chuckle, a predatory gleam in his dark eyes. "I guess they never planned on an attack coming from within. They're defending the perimeter against a frontal assault. They aren't expecting a strike team to literally materialize inside the secure zone." "Corporate arrogance," Tess agreed, spinning a spoon thoughtfully on the table. "They think their black site is impenetrable because it's buried in a moon. They aren't watching the interior because they don't think anyone can get in." "So, the infiltration happens during their night cycle," Amara confirmed, tapping the datapad. Ellie jumps us directly into her old cell. We secure Jade and James first. Once the kids are safe, we move down the corridor, neutralize the lone guard at the blast doors that lead to the machine, and proceed to the testing chamber. That's where things get complicated, Finn said, pointing to the massive circle Ellie had drawn in the center of the map. The amplifier. We don't just need to steal it. We need Ellie to use it to jump the orchid out of the system. Are you sure you can get this thing to work once we get it back on board? Leave that to me, Tess said, a fierce, confident grin spreading across her face. If it's drawing enough power to punch holes in space-time, it's probably wired directly into the main grid. I'll bring a portable fusion shunt. I can spoof the power draw on the facility's network. The monitoring computers will still show the machine as plugged in and charging, even while Raffi is carrying it down the hallway. Then we can figure out how to power it up. Tess looked across the table at Freya for some support. Sure, Freya replied, leaning back in her chair with a confident, grease-stained grin. That will be the easy part. And the weight? Finn asked, looking at the massive weapons specialist. If she says it's only a little bigger than her, Raffi grunted, rolling his broad shoulders. I can carry it. I've hauled heavier ordnance through hotter landing zones. I'll strap it to my back. My hands stay free for the mag rifle. Amara paused, tapping her fingers against the table as she looked at the young girl. Ellie, how close will we need to get the ship before you can open the gate? We can't get too close to the moon and risk being seen. We will have to go quietly. Ellie stared down at the map, chewing her lower lip. I know I can open gates at a big distance now, but I can't give you any numbers. That's all right, kid, Amara said, offering a tight but reassuring smile. We will have to go as close as we can and just try. We don't have much choice. Amara looked around the table, the tactical pieces finally coming together in her mind. Ellie, after you open the gate, how long will it stay open? And can you come with us? It will help if we have someone who knows the layout and can talk to the other kids. A heavy, uneasy silence fell over the galley. Finn's jaw tightened, and Raffi shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The idea of taking a child back into a black site they were actively raiding went against every protective spacer instinct they had. But as Finn looked at the map, the cold logic of the request settled in. If they couldn't find the kids quickly, or if the facility layout had changed, they would be trapped. They needed a guide. Ellie didn't seem surprised by the question. The gate stays open for around 13 minutes if I am not concentrating to hold it open longer. 13 minutes, Finn muttered, doing the terrifying math in his head. 13 minutes to breach a cell block, extract 2 prisoners, slice a corporate power grid, steal a heavy experimental amplifier, and get back through the door. Doc and I will prep the med bay, Amara commanded, slipping seamlessly into her role as captain. When those kids come aboard, they are going to need immediate medical attention. Jake, you keep the engines hot and the comms dark, and I will join you in the pilot's seat when I can. This isn't something we can practice for. Tess and Freya will then need to power up the machine, and Ellie needs to do her thing to get us out of this system safely. Finn watched the crew spring into action, the heavy despair that had gripped him since the morgue finally beginning to lift. They had a team, they had a target, and thanks to Leon and Ellie, they had a way in. He glanced around the table. The plan was terrifying in its simplicity, hinging on speed, surprise, and the impossible power Ellie carried. If any piece failed, if the power spoof faltered, if extra guards appeared, or if the gate closed too soon, They'd be trapped deep inside an Athelgard black site with no escape. Are we sure about this? Finn asked quietly, looking directly at Ellie. Ellie, if you open this door for us, the shadows are going to notice. It's going to hurt. Ellie looked back at him, her dark eyes filled with a fierce, quiet courage that made Finn's chest ache. They hurt Jade and James every day. I don't want to go home, Ellie said, her voice steady. But I have to go back. I have to save them. Finn let out a long breath, nodding slowly. All right. We go in.